How close are we really to entering the war for Germany to get involved in either of these two global conflicts? I took some pictures for you that I just saw out there with my own eyes, and they are extremely worrying. And I believe the situation is escalating that far. And the Chancellor reiterated yesterday that he will not, under any circumstances, get involved in the Iran conflict. And let's take a look at that now.
Unlike what the United States has demanded, however, the Europeans only want to provide escort protection for ships after a ceasefire. It's quite noticeable how clearly Donald Trump criticized Friedrich Merz on that point again.
So, and maybe many people don't know this, but normally airplanes are refueled at about 5,000 meters altitude. What we see on Flight Radar 24 are several strata tankers that are currently in the air and airplanes that, yes, I really have to say it like this, are being refueled. However, I wouldn't have thought that these are in Lower Saxony and are being refueled at an altitude of, now hold on, somewhere between 50 and 100 meters. You don't believe me? Well, then take a look at this. I was able to see the whole thing with my own eyes just now, and that's why this video is coming out so late. So again, my question is, how close are we actually to getting involved in the war? Now that we know or believe that Iran could also hit us or can, we don't really know for sure. And I don't know if you can hear it, I know. Here jets are flying overhead almost every 5 minutes. Yeah.
We have oil and fuel for the next 40 to 45 days. The president, whom we can see here next to me, has now declared a state of emergency, an energy emergency.
And we have known since yesterday that there is enough on the world market for everyone and no one would have to suffer. That's why I'm wondering why the Philippines have already declared a state of emergency. And the next question I'm asking myself is, wait a minute, are these jets really meant for Iran or maybe actually for Ukraine to intervene there if, for example, no more American weapons are delivered? I mean, of course, that's speculation, but it's something we definitely have to consider now. If the Americans now withdraw their support. And may I ask you for one more thing? Would you maybe leave me a like and a subscription to support this channel? It would mean so incredibly much to me. Thank you so much. Let's continue with the news.
Yes, at the same time, there are already considerations for a peace initiative for the time after a possible war. We don't know how long it will last. But there could be, for example, a contact group, because it is assumed that the United States and Iran will not speak directly with each other. The Europeans could then come into play as mediators.
Yes, what works so wonderfully in Ukraine is now supposed to be taken over by the Europeans. By the way, for about 24 hours after the big NATO exercise ended, they had their entire airspace full of fighter jets, some of which didn't even show up on Flight Radar 24. How can I say that with 100% certainty? Well, I checked Flight Radar, I have a paid subscription, and the jets that were flying up there, of those I only saw the Stratotanker from the Americans. So yeah, what are they really planning here? And how much of a threat are we already facing from Iran? That's a question we really need to clarify urgently.
The Alternative for Germany members of the European Parliament also voted in favor of the repatriation regulation, but there would have been a majority even without them.
Thank you very much for your attention. Wait a second, maybe we should clarify that as well. Do you remember the chat control? Yes, the one that was the European Union's pet project. That could only be prevented yesterday with the votes of the Alternative for Germany, so now there will be no more chat control. That's right, once again, they openly voted together with the Alternative for Germany, and it was a very close call. If they hadn't voted for it, there would still be chat control here. And now I ask again, how big is the emergency really? How close are we to an attack either on Russia or even on Iran? Because no one really wants to comment on that. If you ask me personally now, since Friedrich Merz is always a big liar, I would guess that we are preparing for defense against Iran. I'm not sure what you think, so please share your opinion below.
The law has passed. Rejected asylum seekers can now also be sent to deportation centers outside the European Union if they cannot be returned to their home country.
So, what did the press get for leaving out important details? Exactly the thing with the chat control, and that it was actually really important. Exactly, that the votes of the Alternative for Germany were included there again. Otherwise, they would have just continued. How great is the pressure, actually? Well, let's be honest, if we maybe want to pull ourselves out of all this somewhere, then we would really need it urgently. And the votes of the right wing, who are now saying, no, we have a nationalist attitude. All the planes that have just flown over here are solely for defense purposes. You can't do that with the SPD. They are still the biggest warmongers. And above all, they even take the side of the Iranians and not the American side. I would say to act in a nationalist way. And that's where, and this is my personal opinion, my fear comes from the fact that they might be trying to force the SPD out in order to maybe keep the peace here. But what Friedrich Merz has in his mind right now, or whether he urgently wants war, none of us know. There's only one thing we do know. Shortly before he became chancellor, he wanted to give Putin an ultimatum. He wanted to deliver the Taurus. That is, assembled, mind you, and he wanted to get involved on the side of Ukraine. Thank God he hasn't done that to this day. And the question is, if you need changing majorities later on, where are you going to get them from here in Germany?
Subtitling. Let's continue. The G7 foreign ministers are struggling today in France to find a common approach to end the Iran war. Federal Foreign Minister Wadephul is calling on the United States to include Europe in their planning in the future. United States Secretary of State Rubio, however, shares Donald Trump's criticism that the NATO allies did not help in the Iran war. Rubio takes the position that Iran is violating international law by threatening global shipping.
I don't know if you can hear this annoying buzzing through the microphone, but if you ask me for my opinion, well, who actually has such good connections? To the White House, that's Meloni, still relatively good. Orban has a great relationship with the White House and the Alternative for Germany here in Germany. And of course, I wonder, man, all these votes that have gone through now, all these parts that have now been decided, these attempts at rapprochement, why is the Alternative for Germany actually allowed to criticize the Americans? And nothing happens, they just accept it in silence. Did Friedrich Merz just have a realization that he's not only losing the people here, but maybe that he has to worry about the future of his children if, let's say, supersonic missiles with cluster munitions fly over here and we don't have an Iron Dome? And maybe he just had a realization, yes, maybe to actually do politics. Because the outcry that this razor-thin vote could only be passed with the Alternative for Germany, that outcry is missing. Or did you hear about it in any press at all? As far as I know, Arbeitsgemeinschaft der öffentlich-rechtlichen Rundfunkanstalten der Bundesrepublik Deutschland and zweites deutsches Fernsehen are not reporting on it. It remains exciting, and that on a Friday afternoon.